All right, welcome to our next video in our series in programming in Java. This is the final fraction calculator video. You've done it, you've made it this far. There were 3 previous checkpoints and you have this 4th final component and then you're done. Checkpoint 1 was about setting up a basic user input loop to receive information from the user. Then in checkpoint 2 we standardized the inputs to make sure it was easy to perform whatever math we were going to perform. Checkpoint 3 was about adding the functionality of addition, so you can now add things together. We know that for this checkpoint, we did not need to worry about reducing or simplifying our answer in any way. And now we see the rubric for the final checkpoint, which shows that we should be able to handle the 4 math operations: addition, subtraction, addition, multiplication, and division. And we should be able to handle any combination of whole number, mixed number, and proper fraction. So I should be able to divide a whole number and a proper fraction. I should be able to multiply a mixed number and a mixed number. Any of those combinations should work. In addition, we should be protecting against dividing by 0. If our program tries to divide by 0, we should notify the user that that's not something that can be done. We also want a help menu to be produced now, so that if they type help and they get a description of how this works. Students ask me all the time, how do I know if my help menu is good enough? My answer is always, if your little brother or little sister or like your Uncle Bob or whoever, if you could just pull them in front of your program and you told them if they're confused, type help. If your help menu would explain to that person how to use your fraction calculator and they could then use it, then you're good to go. I would say no more than a paragraph's worth of text and make it useful. Don't just blob information in there. But we want to have the help menu, and then as normal, we want to have the quit function as well. There are extra credit opportunities, right? You could do multiple operations rather than just 2 terms in one operation. You can have 3 or 4 or 5 terms. If you're going to have multiple operations, you can add order of operations, which is extra credit, and is a pretty significant challenge. I wouldn't undertake it lightly. Parentheses is an option. You can do input error checking. If somebody tries to say 5 plus banana, can your code catch that and prevent that from happening? And so those are just some of the examples. We see a full list of other extra credit options here. I've also had students propose extra credit to me, and you're always welcome to send me an email or talk to me in class and see if there's something specific you'd like to do. As always, make sure that you've done your header, your comments, everything looks good, indentation, curly brackets, identifier names. Are you using capital or lowercase letters when you're supposed to? Take some pride in this work here. So what does it look like live? Well, I can show you an execution of my code. So this is the final version. So we've got, like if I say 4 plus 5, that's 9. You'll notice that my code does go ahead and shave off the over 1. My code noticed if the denominator is 1, then go ahead and display the final answer without the denominator, right? So 4 plus 5 is 9. How about 3 and a half times 2? And there we see that's going to be 7, right? 3.5 times 2 is 7. So we can see whole number, mixed number, and whole number. How about 3/4 times 3/4? That gives us 9/16. That's the correct fraction there. And we know that can't be simplified any further. There's no common factors between a 9 and a 16, so we're content with that answer. We ought to be able to still handle negatives. So if I said like 100 plus negative 5 and 1/2, that should give us 189 divided by 2, which if I'm not mistaken is probably the number 94.5. Could that be right? And I think that jives with subtracting 5.5 from 100. So you want to be able to handle addition. Like I said, let's model division one time. Let's see if it's working correctly. I'm going to say 20 divided by 1/10. There's a good one that can throw off some programs because of where the divisions are. When I enter that one in, boom, we get 200. And as always, if I say quit, we say thanks for using Fraction Calculator. So the new things here are you should have a help menu implemented. You should be checking against divide by 0, and you should be able to multiply, divide, and subtract. You should also, something called regression testing in industry, which is when you build the new thing, make sure you didn't break any of the old things. You should make sure that addition still works. You should make sure that like converting to a common type still works. So just something to be aware of when you're getting into it. So where were we in our pseudocode document? Well, I said this is now checkpoint final, right? There's the 3 checkpoints, and then the final one, which is all math operations and simplified answers and help. All right, so a lot of what we've written doesn't really change here, right? We greet the user, Boolean scanner, we pull this up. If it was quit, we turn off. I always like checking for quit first because then, you don't have to do all this extra work. But now we're here and we know if we got to an else, it wasn't quit. We know we've been asked to do some math. We used likely a scanner or maybe a substring to pull apart the 2 numbers in the operation. We've got these tokens and we've converted them to the right format. That was one of our checkpoints we already did. And then we probably did the math on those 2 numbers. And we were able to assume that it was addition for checkpoint 3, but now it could be anything we want. So you might recall that I recommend making a math method to handle the math. And what I do is I pass down number 1, number 2 in the operator. I give all the information I need to do the math. I let this method do everything it needs to do and then just return an answer. And that way I'm not gumming up my main method so that it includes so many lines of code. That's just not really good design. So let's hop down to convert was a part of a previous checkpoint. We don't need to worry about that right now. The math method, what's nice is if I have factored this out into its own method, it's actually not painfully difficult to add subtraction, division, and multiplication to it. We've already kind of done that part before. So we're going to say we still need to get the numerator and denominator from each fraction. They still need to be ints. And then we're ready to do the math. Now, up until this point, to find the new numerator, the new denominator. Up until this point, we just kind of assumed it was addition, so we didn't need to check anything. But now that it could be addition, we should really check, hey, operator, are you addition? If you are, then we will handle the numerators and denominators like we're performing addition. Else, if we can check if operator dot equals subtraction, right? So we can check if the operation is any of these specific symbols. And we could make 4 parts to our if-else chain, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Those of you looking to do extra credit, you can add modulus here, or you can add exponents here, but obviously be aware, exponents with fractions is its own special beast. But what's neat is, we just add a few if-else statements to account for whatever the operation is, and then you're kind of done with this part. You ask that the string be returned. You've done the math on it already. You're good to go. Now, there's one thing that needs to be worked on here, which is we need to be able to reduce the fraction. You'll only get partial credit if the answer was 10/8. Well, 10/8 can be reduced to 5/4. So to get the most points you can possibly get for this assignment, we want to see our fraction reduced. And for that, I recommend making, you've probably guessed it, if I have some separate function I want done, I like making a separate method for it. So what do we say we make a reduce method? And you can build this a lot of different ways. I kind of like taking, for parameters, I like to take a numerator, denominator, and then as parameters, and then when we're done, I like to return the reduced fraction, often as a string, but I mean, that's a choice you can make. I had a particular moment in class called good cat food. Good cat food, if you remember that from class, you can just use the good cat food for this part of your code. If you don't remember what good cat food is, talk to me in class, send me an email. but it was our tip that was given to help remind you how we could use code to reduce two fractions, or to reduce two numbers by a common factor. So anyways, I'm going to make this reduce method, takes the numerator denominator, it's going to return back the fraction. So what I really could just do is I can say string, I don't know, I would probably name it reduced, equals reduce, passing in new numerator, and new denominator, whatever it is you chose to name these, denominator. And then we can just kind of return reduced, right? So maybe I'll change that to that. So I recommend make a reduce method just so your math method doesn't have to get so entirely long. I think that's a good way to decompose the problem. So we've talked about adding if-else statements to account for the other math operations. We've talked about reducing the function right here. I also think, if it's a whole number, we don't want the over 1 to present, so you could ask if reduced dot ends with over 1. Then you could do something with reduced to help it print out not with that /1. There's a little hint for how to handle whole numbers is don't forget ends with. I think is a good way to do it. The other one is we got to figure out, well, what happens if the denominator is 0? So that's usually, before we go to reduce, it's usually after the math is done, we can check right here. What happens if the denominator is 0? So we should probably have some if new denominator is 0, then we probably want to do something different. So that takes care of the new math operations. What happens if it's 0? How do we reduce it? How do we trim out the over 1 if it's a whole number? So we've kind of taken care of, I think, everything we need to numerically. The last thing I would say is, since we're adding a help menu now, I'm probably going to add to the if-else chain, this is back in the main method, I'll say else if input was help, print help menu. And sometimes it's nice to have a separate method whose job it is just to contain all the text of the help menu. Sometimes it doesn't feel good having a paragraph of explanatory text in your main method. That's not always good. And then we just move this else down one more rung. So every command we receive, we're going to say, hey, look, were you quit? No. Were you help? No. All right, now I can assume that you're math, and I'm going to pass the command that you've given through all the necessary methods until I eventually print a result. Give yourself time to implement this and fully test it, and take advantage of the fact that I have a model example of test cases that you can try, so that you can really put your program through the paces. And then if it passes everything and it's written well and it's commented well, then you can have comfort in knowing what your grade is likely to be well before you ever actually receive your official grade from me. So that's the video. Thanks for watching. Congratulations on finishing Fraction Calculator. It's a big accomplishment. Have an excellent day.